Michel, consciousness has been a lifelong obsession with me, and I've come at it from two perspectives. One, in neuroscience, that was my original training, and philosophy of mind, particularly analytic philosophy of mind, which is what I've been doing for several decades. You have a radically different approach and a way of thinking, and I should learn how you think.
Yes, my view on consciousness is based on phenomenology, but a phenomenology which is not just a theoretical phenomenology read in books, but a practiced phenomenology. So when people ask me, can you define consciousness? My first reaction is a sort of unease. How can I define consciousness? And I ask them, who is asking the question? Just to allow them to perceive that their very question is supposing that they are conscious. Yeah. And therefore, I want them to become aware that they are conscious at the very moment where they are raising the question. And therefore, the object of the question is precisely no object, because an object is out there. But the consciousness is not out there. It's the source of the question. It's the source of the possibility of seeing object, and so on and so on. And another point, when I say, can I define consciousness? Define, in the very word of definition, that means finiteness. Namely, define consciousness means that you want to oppose it to something else. But now, at this very moment, your consciousness and my consciousness are everything for us. Yeah. Because whatever I can think of, even the farthest galaxy in the universe, is a present thought. Yeah, right. In my consciousness. Yeah. And it can be in your consciousness because I'm speaking of it to you. So for us, it's impossible to define consciousness in the sense of circumscribing it. Another point, if I want to define consciousness, I have to use words. I can use words, many people use words to try to define consciousness, but even trying to define consciousness in this sense of using words is wrong, because a word is displacing your attention from the sound to the object that is referred to by the sound. For instance, if I tell you a rose, you see a rose in your imagination, and you are pushed from the sound, rose, to the flower. But if I tell you the word consciousness, what you should do in order to grasp what consciousness is, in order to have a taste of consciousness, you just have to be carefully attentive to this sound, consciousness, and feel consciousness resonate in you. But you don't have to fetch something outside, because it's not outside. You could say, for instance, in the definition of people who work on neurocognitive science, consciousness is an ability to synthesize information coming from various areas of the brain. Or consciousness is a process of reflecting yourself upon yourself in order to bring yourself to your attention, and so on and so on. But all these are just aspects of what you call consciousness. The real thing, I would say, the thing itself, in the words of Husserl, is not that. And it's not a thing. It's what you are feeling here and now.
Yeah. The deep question of consciousness, of course, is why we have an inner felt experience, why there's an inner movie, and whatever analogy we want to make, that there are images that I feel, that's what's it like to be, or a felt experience, or an inner awareness that other things that are made of the same atoms, tables, chairs, clothes, don't have. So we have this inner felt experience. So how does that come about from the physical world? I mean, that's the ultimate question.
Yes, but of course the question itself has to be questioned. And this is a typical move of continental philosophy.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
that's so
Continental philosophy don't answer questions. They ask questions about the question. And where do you start from when you ask the question about the origin of consciousness in the workings of the body, maybe the brain? Where do you start from? Maybe I can ask you the question.
I start from where I have a sense, and I see you, I see tables, I see this wonderful library where I think you've told me you spend a lot of your time and appreciate the history of French thought, this wonderful library. And that's, I feel that, I see that. It's an inner experience.
Absolutely.
And nothing, the table doesn't have that. This table, but it's made of the same stuff. It's made of the same, number of elements. We're all made of the same stuff. And yet I'm able to appreciate this library that you told me about, and the table can't.
Okay, but even that, when you say I experience consciousness, I'm 100% with you. Now, then, when you say the table is not conscious, I say that's fine. I also believe that the table is not conscious, but I know that this conclusion comes from a certain reasoning within my present consciousness. The conclusion comes from a lack of the elements that make me convinced that you are conscious and make you convinced that I'm conscious. What this table lacks is a behavior, it's movement, it's speech, it's a lack of anything that could trigger my empathy. So I have none of the elements that usually makes me think that another being is conscious.
Yeah.
So any conclusion you can draw about the consciousness of anything or anybody is based on this present consciousness of yours, and which maybe is not even a consciousness of yours, because identifying yourself as the thinker is also a process which is a little bit complex. So it's just from this present consciousness that it comes. Even thinking, for instance, that consciousness may come from the workings of the body or the brain and so on, is a thought that is entertained at this very moment by your present consciousness, out, of course, of certain solid elements of your scientific knowledge. But as you know, these elements of scientific knowledge can be interpreted otherwise than by the standard idea that, for instance, brain causes consciousness. William James famously has listed several interpretations that are not exactly the causal one, that can make sense of the correlation between the brain and the conscious events. So, this idea that the brain is producing consciousness and we want to know how, itself has to be questioned in terms of our present consciousness and in terms of the various other possibilities of connection between this brain and consciousness, which I agree there are, because there are experiments showing that there is correlation. But this correlation has to be questioned, and we don't have to be immediately convinced by only one type of explanation. We have to explore other types of explanation.